There's nothing left to do now but review The Bride.
Hello everyone, welcome back. We are back, the Eye of the Storm podcast. So today we're going to be discussing or debating The Bride. But before we get into that, you already know what time it is. Movie recommendation time. Are we allowed to recommend series which are coming out?
That depends. Do you have a time machine?
Well, what if you're you're a huge fan of season one? Okay, you know what? Let me not do that. You're right.
Let's review stuff we've seen.
Cool. All right, cool. So this week I'm going to recommend to you guys a BBC series called The Industry. It's a really good one. It's raw though, I'll be honest with you. It's raw. Pretty much it's just about these young finance graduates. Pretty much the day in the life of a young finance graduate in kind of like that whole world. I think this was during 2008, and obviously there was like a financial crisis during that time, so it gets pretty tense. It's a good watch. It's definitely a good watch. I don't know how many seasons there are. I believe there might be 4 seasons, and I think the 4th season just came out in 2026 as well. But I'm currently I finished season 1. I'm going to be on season 2. You can watch it on BBC iPlayer, but I would recommend it if you guys are into those into that type of thing.
Cool. I got dragged to watch Hoppers. So I was trying to watch The Bride, but the person I went with didn't want to watch a horror movie, which it didn't turn out to be. So I watched Hoppers first before watching The Bride.
I've got 2 questions. Number 1, was this person over the age of 10?
Yes, they were.
Okay. Second one is Hoppers. The premise, it's an Avatar ripoff, right? Human
goes into projects their mind into animal. Yes, basically, yeah.
Okay, carry on.
Yeah, okay, cool. So what I was saying was, 1, I was shocked with how busy it was in there, in the cinema. It was like quite packed. And 2, there were all adults in there. There were no kids in the viewing that I went to because it was like a bit of a later viewing. So clearly this one was advertised well enough that, the adults wanted to go and watch it. But as Daniel mentioned, it's almost like an Avatar ripoff where you project your consciousness into an animal, and it's just this like young girl who grew up in an area is trying to save the nature reserves in an area that she grew up in, and I had memories with her grandma and stuff like that in this area. So she's trying to preserve it against this government official who's trying to, shut it down to build out a new runway. So in order to do so, she has to bring the animals back into the reserve so that, by law, they're not able to build the rest of the runway. To be honest, it's quite funny actually in a lot of places. Good charm, good heart, kind of it's like easy watching. I mean, it's a kids movie, so it should be easy watching. It was a lot of fun actually. I kind of understand why people wanted to go watch it. Kind of glad that I watched it as well. It's just a lot of fun without thinking too deeply about anything, without thinking too deeply about like the mechanics and how things work and like character choices and stuff like that. It's just a good time at the movies. On that note, if you just want something lighthearted and easy to watch and easygoing and funny as well, go watch Hoppers, pretty much.
So my recommendation this week is The New Adventures of Old Christine, which is a 2006 sitcom about this woman who is somewhere around 40. She's just gotten divorced. She's trying to run like a women's gym, and she's trying to get that off the ground as a business. And she has a good relationship with her ex-husband, and they have a child together. And then the complication is that the ex-husband gets a new girlfriend who is also named Christine. And so everybody starts calling the new girlfriend New Christine. And therefore Christine becomes Old Christine, which does nothing for her ego and self-esteem. And from that point on, kind of fairly standard sitcom plots happen as she tries to date, as she tries to deal with the fact that, her husband is moving on faster from the divorce than she is. There's stuff related to the gym. Early on in the series, her son gets into this posh private school where she does not belong at all, and she tries to deal with these awful people who are populating the school. There's 5 seasons of it, and it starts to lose steam in season 4, and I've not seen season 5 yet, so the recommendation is for seasons 1 to 3, and that is solid sitcom fare. It stars Julia Louis-Dreyfus, who, if you've seen Seinfeld or Veep, she's just one of the funnier comedians out there. She does especially cringing embarrassment like nobody else, and they tap that in this series whenever they can. It's got other well-known actors in there too, and it's kind of a weird one because it's kind of on the one hand a very standard sitcom, but it's got some great actors in this, and it's got some decent writing in it. Like, it's no Frasier, but it's also no Big Bang Theory, but it's just a solid sitcom if you like those. There's at least 3 seasons that are quite good, and then after that, I make no promises. So that's my recommendation for the week.
Okay, it's time for the main event, The Bride. Danny G, please do your thing.
Okay, so The Bride is a Gothic romance movie. This is a tough one to summarize. So there is a mob prostitute in the 1930s who gets killed because she rebels against the mob boss. She is then reanimated by Frankenstein's monster and a mad scientist who are trying to make a bride for Frankenstein because he's lonely after walking the earth for 100 years. And then she gets possessed by the spirit of Mary Shelley. And then she goes on a feminist rampage through the 1930s Chicago. What did we think of The Bride?
I'm gonna I'm gonna start. As crazy as everything Daniel just summed up of this movie and how wild and maybe unfocused and unserious a lot of the movie is, I can't lie to you, I enjoyed this a lot. I had a very, very fun time with this movie. And I feel like it's more style over the substance that's in this, because it tried to touch on like important topics of like, feminism and stuff like that, and ultimately did it in the most lazy way possible, and wasn't really clear in what it really wanted to be about, and like in its direction, in the way it like wanted to tackle it. But saying that, honestly, I actually, as incoherent as the bride was for most of the movie and like her ramblings and whatever, it was just fun to watch. Honestly, it was just fun to watch, and like, and you kind of chuck in like the element of like Frankenstein in it, and sort of their like, kind of like dynamic, and they kind of go on this crazy rampage. And I even like some of like the style choices that they made with this. One, the design and the costumes of like both Frankenstein and the bride, and like how like her reinvigoration like left this like stain on her face and her tongue and stuff like that. Just like that whole design I thought was like really cool. I dug it a lot. And the whole kind of Frankenstein kind of living through the movies and like, seeing himself, or like trying to like see how he fits within sort of certain movies and stuff like that was quite interesting. And I quite like the sort of stylistic choice there. And again, like the bride had like really incoherent ramblings and was just like kind of talking a bunch of nonsense. But I don't know why. I kind of enjoyed it, and I kind of wish there was more substance behind what she was saying. But just like the performance of it, and like, the way it was acted and the way it was portrayed, I messed with it heavy. I quite liked it a lot. It's just disappointing that they couldn't like quite narrow down and like really focus on. I see the way you both look at me, but it's really annoying that they couldn't like narrow it down and like really focus and like have like a bit of a coherent like kind of through line that they wanted to tell, with kind of like all the important stuff and what it kind of thought it was trying to say. It didn't really like land on anything. It does drag the movie down quite a bit, but everything kind of like built around it, all like the kind of like style choices that they made with it, the way it's shot, the way that like the actors portray these characters and stuff like that, I mess with it heavy. So ultimately, is it a good story? Absolutely not. Did I have fun with it? Absolutely, yes.
It was a dodgy movie, but I liked it, but not by much. I had issues with Ida. I had issues with her dialogue because I felt like it was trying to be too smart, if that makes sense. It was like one of those films that were trying to be too artsy, but a lot of the times films where are trying to be too artsy is mainly to do with, the set design and just pretty much the aesthetics of the movie a lot of the times. Whereas this one, it felt like they were trying to be too artsy with her actual dialogue, because it was kind of like throwing me off, because I was trying to understand what the hell she was talking about. I'll keep it a buck with you. Like, it was really annoying me because it was just distracting me from what's actually going on to the movie because I'm trying to figure out what the hell she just said 2 minutes ago and how it correlates to what's going on now. That being said, I did like the story. It's just like I liked what was going on, so that's why I actually liked the film. But when I say not by much, it's because of the whole the dialogue, and just like I said, I feel like it was just trying to be too smart. And also, I was a bit confused at first with the possession of Ida with Mary Shelley. So that means there's some sort of significance with Mary Shelley. So she's the author of Frankenstein, or like I just don't understand Mary. Like, I don't know who Mary Shelley is or her significance or why she was even possessing Ida, but she possessed Ida before she died. So at first when I was seeing that, I thought it was a thing where, is this like some sort of disability? First of all, it was a bit like Tourette's or something. I just thought there was some sort of mental disability that was going on here. But then obviously later on, you realize that it was, it's an actual evil possession. So, and then she ended up kind of like fading away in like majority parts of the film, because she showed up, she had a strong presence in the beginning, and then afterwards, when it transitioned from a gothic type of movie to a crime type of scene chase type of film, she wasn't really there anymore. So I was trying to understand what her significance was exactly, and if she was even needed in the first place. So this one's a mixed bag. However, overall, I can say I liked it, but just not by much. but I did like what I was watching. I liked her relationship dynamic with Frankenstein. So that was kind of like my favorite parts. But like I said, it's not by much. So I'm not even mad if people come to me and say this was a trash movie. I will not argue with you whatsoever because I was slowly going into that direction as well.
All right. So I hated every minute of this. This is just not my kind of movie. The main thing that I didn't like about this was just style and tone and just how the story was told. And the movie could have won me over if it had done something interesting or challenging or persuasive or any variation of that, and it just didn't. And I think the reason it didn't is that there are way too many ideas in this that are barely correlated and barely harmonized. They actively crowd each other out. And if you pick any one of them, it could have been something, right? So you have kind of this Ida raging against the machine, right? And kind of just having this life of just being exploited and finally having enough and pushing back. You've got Frankenstein's monster being lonely and just being willing to cross ethical lines in order to have even a chance at stopping that or putting an end to that. You have Mary Shelley coming back from the grave to deliver her message that she couldn't deliver in her lifetime. Then you have the fixation of Frankenstein's monster with this Hollywood actor who we can talk about what that symbolized, but that seemed to be like an aspirational picture of normalcy, right? So, something like that, but I don't think that goes very far. And then we've got the detective who is not seeing the time of day because she's a woman in 1930s Chicago, and she's actually trying to do this investigation and bring this killing spree to an end, but the world doesn't want her to succeed and barely perceives her. And like all of those are ideas that are totally fine ideas for a movie, but they should have cut at least half of them, if not more, so that the rest has room to grow and breathe and actually do something. I was not entertained. I was not impressed. I wasn't persuaded by anything, and was most of all annoyed for much of it. And it's all in the execution, right? Like I can get on board with a bonkers premise, but this is not that bonkers. I can get on board with like a larger than life eccentric performance, but this is not that either. So it just doesn't deliver on any of the stuff it wants to deliver or that it promises. I think it's just like Jonathan, earlier you said this is not as smart as it thinks it is or as it wants to be. There's a word for that, and that word is pretentious. And this is the most pretentious movie I've seen since The Monkey a year ago, where it just is way too impressed by itself and it takes itself way too seriously. And as a result, it doesn't try very hard to convince anything or achieve anything or reach a bar where you could call this a success. And that's a shame because like this is a very quirky, like as an idea, it's pretty quirky. It's certainly unique. It's certainly different from any other movie we're going to see this year. I just wish it was good. Let's talk about it.
On the style, I think like I can understand where you're coming from on the style. I think because it doesn't fall in the traditional type of like Hollywood movie that we kind of come to expect. And kind of as I was watching it, I was like kind of bucketing it with things like The Surfer, which of course like we kind of had like reverse experience with that movie where I hated every single minute I had to watch the Surfer and like other things like that. I can understand a movie trying to do something different, and here I just felt like I appreciated some of the elements that it was trying to do a little bit more than what it seemed like you did. Like for example, before I kind of go into that, like I do agree that there's like too many ideas kind of going on in this. There's like too many like things that are muddled up. So like even the things I did like where he's trying to like see some type of like normalcy or like what his life could have been if he wasn't Frankenstein in these movies. I quite like that idea. And like then when they're doing the thing where they're having a conversation, but that conversation is also playing out in the movie that's kind of going on. I just like some of the choices that they make there, even like when they break out into like the kind of like song and dance and stuff like that in sort of the gala that they're in. I thought that was great. Even like Mary Shelley, the whole aspect of Mary Shelley you probably could have cut and like could have got rid of. But even when she is there, I'm like, I don't mind it. Like, I actually quite like enjoy like this like weird and different take that they try to do with this. Her speaking to this like possession that like I can't remember exactly, but I'm sure they had like some type of like minor communication in some instances of the movie between like Ida and Mary Shelley that was like possessing her overall.
Did they?
But, like,
So,
I think it was like
serious question.
It was like one scene where like I can't remember exactly, but there was like a minor interaction it seemed between them in some of the later parts of the movie. But for me, every time this movie did something out of the norm, I kind of found myself liking it as opposed to disliking it. The big downfall is just the 101 ideas it wanted to shove into this, and it thinking it's smarter than it is, and it thinking that it has a message when really there's nothing to be taken from this movie by the end of it, to be honest. But I don't know. I know Jonathan mentioned about like her ramblings, and he didn't like that. I thought it was great. I thought it was just funny. It just had like an energy, like it had like a strong energy that I really liked, that like kind of came through the screen and just kind of had me captivated anytime she was just like chatting rubbish. Ultimately,
The rambling, was it supposed to have connection with, like, was there any foreshadowing or connection with what was currently going on in the scene? Was it like pretty much cohesive with what was going on? Because I was trying to, like I said, I was trying to understand what the hell she was saying. And then once I was trying to understand what she was saying, the next question was, okay, what does this mean for this scene, or what should I look out for in the upcoming scenes? That's why I feel like this. I said to myself, am I dumb? Because while I was watching the movie, I was like, maybe it's a thing where I'm just not smart enough to understand what's going on. Is it that I'm dumb, or is it a thing where it was just random rambling?
Yeah, it's one of those movies where you look at a movie and say, okay, movie, one of us is stupid, and I'm not sure who.
For real.
Right? Because like whenever something doesn't make sense, there's a chance you just don't get it, right? And like I'm with you, the rambling and the free word association, I did not detect any meaning there. And maybe if you watch it again, sure, maybe it means something. In the moment, I didn't think it was going anywhere, it was saying anything. I think that's kind of my main problem, that it has a lot of energy, but it doesn't have a point. Like, not really. It touches on a bunch of ideas, or like a handful of ideas, but it doesn't quite earn, like it doesn't make its point and doesn't earn it. It's kind of my main problem. So one of my examples here is, I do not understand what Mary Shelley's grievance is. Like, I understand she's a 19th century woman, and she tried to write science fiction and horror, and I'm sure she had a hard time getting published or being taken seriously. Totally get that. It's not in the movie. You're supposed to know it.
Are you supposed to have prior knowledge? I was literally going to ask, are you supposed to have prior knowledge of who Mary Shelley is? Because I was going to ask, who is she exactly? Is she fictional, number one, or is she actually an author?
She's the author who wrote Frankenstein.
This is
in the real world. In the real world, yes.
Okay.
In the opening monologue, she says, basically, I told one story, but I've got more. But I died before I could get them out, and now I'm getting them out. And that is why she possesses Ida.
Okay.
That's the deal.
Okay, but I don't. For someone who doesn't know who she is, that's not really kind of like good at introducing who that person is, because you're not going to understand her significance throughout the story. You know what I'm saying? Throughout the movie. And that was one thing I was like struggling with. I'm just like, what is your significance? Like, who the hell are you? I had to research this, by the way, in terms of like who she actually was. But yeah, for someone just watching it that's not knowing who she is, I don't think they do a really good job at telling us, just giving us letting us know who the hell this woman is and why she's good, why she's so significant.
They pretty much tell us nothing, right? And I don't know Mary Shelley's biography, and maybe she had these big struggles getting the novel published, or maybe she had to publish them under a man's name or something. Like, that's all possible. That would fit in the era, right, in which she lived. I don't know how her novel was received when it first came out, or if it took like 50 years for people to recognize that this was like good, or maybe it was dismissed because it was written by a woman. It's all possible. I don't know. I haven't really researched it. The movie doesn't tell us. It's either there's nothing there, or they don't tell us and you're just supposed to know. And that's kind of one of the problems I have with this, right? That if you think about how to fix this, you could have had a scene where Mary Shelley is trying to get taken seriously as an author, and then she dies before she can get her recognition, and that is why she haunts, or that's why her spirit doesn't come to rest or something. But I think that's already being too literal for this. I think this exists purely on the level of vibes, right? Where you're just supposed to understand her anger, because, and that's it. And I think it would have been possible to weave this into the dialogue, where the things she says hint at what her grievance exactly is, other than just being angry. And I think that is like one of the issues, that it takes this topic for granted and doesn't do any work to fill in any specifics or convince us of anything. Another one that's related to this is Myrna, the female detective. We're just taking it for granted that she can't do her job because she's a woman, right? Which 1930s Chicago absolutely fits. But it's again cluttered up with details, right? Like Jake, right, the detective, kind of calls her his assistant, and Wikipedia calls her his assistant, but she's clearly not. They say like he calls her his assistant so that she can go on the investigation. She would not be allowed there in any other way, because it's no place for a woman in the eyes of the society she lives in, right? But she's really the gifted investigator, and so Jake enables this the entire time and kind of distracts the local police so that she can do her job, and when he's gone she has to do it herself and she can't, and so she has to kind of get around these people. Nobody ever tells her this, they just ignore her, right? And then in the final showdown in the scientist's lair, Myrna starts giving orders, And the police ask, who are you? And she's like, do you even know who I am? It's like, but you've not identified yourself as a detective at this point. Not to mention that you are not a detective just because you have the badge. You have the badge from your partner who is on sick leave and who says, I will retire on the condition that they make you a detective. But that has not happened yet. She's just some rando who took somebody else's badge at this point. Or am I wrong?
I mean, no, I don't think. Yeah, I was gonna say like, no, I don't think you're wrong, and I think even with like a lot of like the feminist stuff that kind of happens in this is it's on the most like basic and like surface level of it. So like, yeah, she's trying to do an investigation and everyone just like ignores her, but she kind of just like has to find a way to kind of carry on her investigation by speaking to the other woman, like for example, speak to the other woman who's also being ignored and not questioned by all the police officers because they just want to speak to the man and stuff like that. Or you have it on the Ida's part where like she kind of just like being sexually harassed by random people throughout the movie, and it's kind of almost like, you know, taken advantage. I'm not trying to say the word, you know, trigger warning, but
she gets assaulted twice. Ida gets assaulted twice.
Yeah, and then it's just like, okay, like we know these things happen, but what is the ultimate thing that you want to say, like in this? And I think there's like a line of something about like, if I said like I was like an astronaut or something like that, as opposed to like, or like why don't they like look up to like astronaut? I can't remember what it was, but it was a bit like there's like things in there, but it's the most basic version of all of this, and it's just like, why don't you craft a story about one aspect of it? Because you're trying to like cover a wide range of things. Why don't you just like focus on one thing and like actually just like tell a story? And like, then how does like the bride play into it? How does Mary Shelley play into it? How does the detective play into it? And how do like the other male characters like also play into this thing? And you can kind of like start to like branch off different things from it.
I just wanted to say, with the detective and not kind of like revealing who she was, I think that scene was kind of like her taking power, because that happened after, you know, when everyone was pretty much was violent demonstrating in the streets, and obviously they were influenced by the bride having, you know, her signature.
That also goes nowhere, by the way. That whole like bride. See, I'm like this in the movie. I don't diss the movie too much, but that whole like bride and like everyone like wearing the face paint. You kind of see that in a couple of scenes with people like wearing it, and then it never kind of like happens again. Apart from like the mad scientist, and I don't know, they kind of like subtly put it in there without like really explaining anything. But like the mad scientist assistant also then has like the black like face lipstick and like a little bit of like the face paint on the face, but that kind of like is introduced and is never addressed again, which was a little bit baffling.
Well, yeah, I hear that. But I think with the inspector, I think that was her way of fighting against the patriarchy. Like, everyone there had their own way. Them was violent protesting, but with her, it was also like in that scene, it was like she was taking power in a way, because obviously she allowed the doctor. So that's kind of like her agreeing with being a follower of a bride in her own way, but at the same time fighting against patriarchy, because of what the bride represents. So in that scene, I thought she addressed that by, number one, letting the doctor bring them back to life, and also finally solidifying that she's an inspector. Because you're right, no, she never reveals that she was, you know, a police detective, inspector, whatever. She never revealed that. However, in that scene in particular, when she kind of like gives the wink to the doctor, I was like, oh, okay, so that's kind of her way saying that she believes in the bride. And that's her way of kind of like taking power. Because I don't think she would have done that if she didn't agree with the bride's message or what the bride represents. So that's why I think there not only shows that she agrees with the bride's symbolic message, but at the same time, through announcing, you know, to the other police detectives that she's an inspector.
But in the first instance, the grievance is that that she is like, she outranks them by being an inspector, but they will not listen to her because she's a woman. But she's not identified her as an inspector yet. If she identifies herself and then they ignore her, that's the mistake, and that's the criticism. But that doesn't happen at that point yet. It's like you can only complain that people are disrespecting you if they have actually made the mistake, and that's kind of an instance of the movie taking this stuff for granted and not actually going through the steps of actually showing it. Right? Actually, one thing I thought that worked quite well was in the beginning when Frank arrives at the doctor and he assumes she's the assistant because she's a woman, and she thinks, what is it? C. Euphronius, like it's Cornelius, not Cornelia, right? And she just assumes that the doctor is a man because it's 1930s and all of that, right? So that worked, I thought. It's a little bit clumsy, it's a little bit rote, like you've seen this 1,000 times, but it works. It makes sense. It makes sense why Frank would behave in that way, and why he would make that assumption, because he has internalized this idea of what a doctor looks like, and it's not her. From her reaction, you can see that she's been hearing this her entire life, and there will never be an end to it. And that is why she kind of just sighs through it. And she's kind of glad when he does come around, when he's not one of the jerks who will not deal with her, but who will actually, once he knows she's a doctor, he respects, her expertise and all of that. That's an example of how to do it better, I thought. And that's like on one end of the spectrum. And then the far other end of the spectrum is pretty much anything to do with the inspector. But that scene where Frank and Cornelia meet, that is the rare exception. The rest of the movie is not like this. Not really. Like, actually, let me give you an example. I've been trying to think of examples of movies that I like that do this better, and one of them is Batman. Remember that scene when Catwoman is in Penguin's Iceberg Lounge and she's wearing a camera, like a camera in the glasses or in the like contact lenses or something, and Batman sees through her eyes what it's like interacting with men. You know what I mean? Remember that sequence?
Yeah.
That is really effective. Like, I think that movie gets a few things like that wrong, but that sequence is strong. Like, that's how you do that. Because he has to watch and he cannot look away and he cannot do anything about it. He has no agency in that because he has to watch. And he has to watch her endure this. The implication being this is every day for her, right? So that's an example of how to do this better and more smartly. And that's the exact opposite of how it's done in this movie.
It felt like a lot was going on. And even though there wasn't really... Okay, so was there a lot going on? So the themes was definitely woman empowerment. Was there anything else? Because if there wasn't anything else, which was supposed to be as significant as obviously the theme of women empowerment, then they really don't have any excuse, because it was 2 hours, I think is a good duration for a film. And kind of like, just if you're covering the theme of women empowerment, then 2 hours should be enough. So sorry, my number one question is, was there any other themes in this film besides women empowerment? That's number one. And number two is, if there was not, why did this feel like a lot was happening and even though they were just covering one theme?
I do think there's other stuff going on here, and one of them is Frank's loneliness and the desire for him to be normal, right? So in the beginning, when it's just him and the doctor, when the movie started, and they have this dialogue, I think, in her office, and he explains why he needs a bride. It's not because he just wants to get laid. It's because he's lonely. He's lived for 100 years and he will live 100 more, and he will be alone the entire time. And he tries to get her to understand how painful this is, right? How painful it is to be lonely, and to be lonely in a way that can never end. Because it's not just he's not met the right person yet. Nobody who is like him exists, and that is why he's lonely. That is a sequence that is quite well done, I thought, that gets this point across. But then it drops it very quickly. Like, for much of the rest of the movie, it doesn't matter anymore. Frank, from that point on, is not really motivated by not wanting to be lonely. So, for example, one way in which this could have been is when the bride is not what he thinks she is, but he has a choice between walking away from her and being lonely again, or following along with her and letting her kind of set the tone and supporting what she wants to do, and in exchange he's not alone anymore. Wouldn't that have been a good idea?
I kind of disagree though, in terms of I do think it does carry through the movie in more of a sense of he's kind of lying to Ida, and he can't help but continue to lie to her so that she doesn't find out the truth and potentially leave him. Even to the point where the detective comes into the frame and like she finds out that her name is actually Ida. He then has to like try to put up a front of like, oh, like, were you sleeping with him before you lost your memory and this, any other, but still like, oh, I'll forgive you, let's just go, or whatever like that, so that he then doesn't lose her. So I do think it carried on quite well through the rest of the movie.
I agree that he keeps lying to her not because he's a bad guy or because he wants to exploit her, but because telling her the truth means he might be alone again, right? That certainly is there. But just in terms of what happens in the movie and in terms of what drives the plot, it very much takes a backseat for much of it. There's one other aspect in which it kind of appears, which is the movies, right? So he's this massive film buff, and I'm not entirely decided on what it means exactly. My interpretation was that this is normalcy and belonging. This is an aspirational image of what life should be like and what you should want out of life, right? The glamour and the dancing and the acceptance by other people and being admired by other people in some way, the way the Hollywood actor is. And that is why he likes these movies so much. And that is why it's so devastating when he meets the actor and is rejected, mostly based on how he looks. I mean, it's also the thing that he's clearly not a waiter, and that even if he was a waiter, he's kind of out of line approaching him at that party in that way, and he shouldn't have expected a very warm welcome, but still he gets rejected by his idol, right? That is kind of also there. My thing is just, is the story about that past the first 15 minutes?
Not really. And then you have that whole element which again kind of didn't get fully explored, was after they killed the two people that tried to assault the bride, of he will be hunted and people will come after him, and like, you know, she doesn't want to live that type of life. He kind of like fears for that. But then I don't know, it doesn't really feel like it's like a strong like presence through the movie. It then kind of turns into this like whole Bonnie and Clyde situation, which kind of actually brings me to one point where I actually think that the movie did like really clever, was when she thought that he was about to like take a bath in the fountain, but no, he's kind of learned to be resourceful, and he's learned that people kind of like throw pennies away in this fountain, and they obviously like need some money to kind of get by, and like, you know, one of the ways that he's figured out how to do that is to go in these fountains and like pick up these pennies or like these coins that people have thrown in there to make a wish. I thought that was like actually quite clever in the sense of like explaining, okay, like how do you get, because it clearly isn't working, and like how you survived for over 100 years, you know, looking the way that you do and being like shunned by society the way that you have been. Kind of to Jonathan's original point, it's like, it's not just feminism stuff, it's also like the lonely stuff, it's also like obsession with the cinema stuff, and it's also like the being shunned by society stuff. There's too much happening.
Yeah, we're up to like 4 major themes here. So, and there's justice as well, and there's the whole crime stuff. Like, I think the whole thing about the mob was not well done at all in the beginning, where it wasn't really clear to me how they related to each other. And then when Ida kind of starts confronting the mob boss, right? I didn't get what was going on because he hadn't been introduced. He was just some guy. I thought she was ranting at a random stranger in the bar, the first, like when the scene started, because he didn't seem to have been part of their group. Or did I miss something?
I actually thought the whole opening part of the movie was, I was concerned at that point, because it wasn't like the strongest opening for the movie. And I think you're right in that it's not 100% clear that this is meant to be the mob, especially because he doesn't look like it. He's not acting like it. He doesn't have to act a certain way, but you know, you have to imply to the audience that this is someone that shouldn't be talked to the way that she talked to him.
It's fine for a scene to make not a lot of sense, and then later on you get more details, and that's kind of what they do here. But it's like an example of they're making this more complicated than it needs to be. I think that's one example. Another one is, why does Mary Shelley exist and Frankenstein's monster exist in the same world? Does it mean anything? Or is it just weird? Or is it careless? Does it mean anything that Mary Shelley and her creation interact? Or am I being too literal about this? Or is there like any point? And how metaphorical can this get before it stops making sense? And if it's metaphorical, what is metaphorical for? I'm going to take my chances. I'm just going on a limb and say it doesn't make sense. So here's the thing, right? So the thing about Mary Shelley addressing the audience, I think that's from the Bride of Frankenstein movie from the 30s. I have not seen this movie. I kind of skimmed the summary of that. And that seems to have this monologue in the beginning where Mary Shelley basically says, I have more stories in me. And here's the next one. Because as far as I know, Bride of Frankenstein is not a Mary Shelley novel. It's a sequel to the Frankenstein movie from the 30s. But it just seems to me like they took this, so this is not a remake of the Bride of Frankenstein movie, right? It kind of takes the idea of there being a Bride of Frankenstein and then tells a completely new story with it, which is fine. You can absolutely do that. But then it's a Game of Thrones thing, right? Where in the adaptation they make changes, but then there's stuff left over from the original, and now the stuff doesn't make sense anymore, right? This is again Cersei drinking wine on the balcony for 2 seasons, because in the original, Mary Shelley having his monologue kind of made sense from what I've read. But then you keep that, but you change everything else. And now the payoff for that is gone. And it's just weird and it's just there. I think that's what it seems like to me.
This is a fault of the film. Because obviously what I got from this, just her being in the film, was the whole creator versus creation theme, right? But
is it? How?
Whoa, what? I wouldn't really say versus in a sense where like interacting. So I'm interpreting verses as in like interacting. So creator interacting with a creation, if you want me to be specific.
Yeah. So we've got Mary Shelley and the bride. Although Mary Shelley doesn't really create the bride, right? She possesses her and then does stuff through Ida's body against her consent.
But yeah, her creation.
But she doesn't create her.
Yeah, she doesn't create Ida, but her creation is Frankenstein, right? So
right. So her creation is Frankenstein, but she doesn't read, like, that's not addressed, right? They don't have a conversation where she's, hey, I created you, and that means X. Or he realizes that he's talking to the person who created her. I didn't pick up on that connection. There's another one where the bride is created by the doctor, and that certainly is an interaction. But in order to be a theme, there has to be repetition. There has to be more than one instance of something. So Is there anything else where creator and creation interact?
Remember the scene where she goes at the end when Frankenstein proposes to her, and then she was like, she's not specifically his bride, but she's just a bride in general. Doesn't that link to the beginning where she says she is the creator of many stories? So, what I took from that, the reason why she wasn't accepting being just Frankenstein's bride, but just like the bride in general, is because she's like the wife, or just that was for me like a representation of what we saw in the beginning when she said, "Oh, she's the creator of many stories that's never been told." So yeah, so I thought that just linked to that.
I don't really see how, but that brings me to my next question, which is, how is being the bride better than being the bride of Frankenstein? Is that not the same thing? Because like throughout the movie, she keeps trying on different names, right? She's Ida, she is Penelope, she's Pretty Penny, she's the bride of Frankenstein, and then finally she's the bride. And it's presented as a kind of like a level up moment, right? Where she finally comes into her own, and she finally is no longer defined by other people, and she's fully empowered and all of that. But a bride is still defined by her relation to somebody else.
But can you say because she doesn't belong to one, but I can't really say she belongs to many, because that was still kind of like you being empowered by a man in a way. Her saying she's the bride and just not belonging to that one man, being like, submitting to that one man, maybe it's just that's kind of like the human embodiment of what woman empowerment is like, okay, I am the bride. Like, I'm not submitting to you. I'm not just your bride, but I am the bride in general. So I don't know, but like some sort of the bride is some sort of way of their version of what woman empowerment looks like.
But is it? I get this whole thing. You don't want to be defined through a man, right? Or in terms of another man. But to be a bride, there has to be a groom or another bride, depending on people's situation. But there has to be another person. Like being a bride means you are defined by another person. That's not independence. That's not self-sufficiency. She already has a name, and she can pick any name she wants. Maybe Ida isn't her real name either, or it's the name that belongs to a worse life or something. And so she wants to be somebody else. But I just genuinely do not understand why being the bride is empowering.
Yeah, I'm not gonna argue that because I don't know. I was trying to reach for something. Anything. But
I mean, I'm serious, right? Like how is this an improvement? All it removes is the name. I don't know. I don't get it. Like, explain it to me. And if there are any brides listening, explain to me how this works, because the movie doesn't. And I genuinely didn't pick up on it at all.
So that means she didn't accept his proposal. So in a way, she was saying, okay, I'm not going to get married to you because that means I'm going to have to submit to you. But I am the bride. But they still established that she loves him. So maybe it links to title, because you know how obviously women's title and women's like their view, pretty much their title in society was to be beneath the man. So maybe if she accepted the bride title, or to be Frankenstein's bride, she'll still be underneath the man, but she wanted to be Frankenstein's equal. So that's why she didn't accept his proposal, but she was saying, I still love you, but I'm not going to accept your proposal. Her reason for not accepting Frankenstein's proposal is because she would have been beneath him, but she wanted to be his equal. So she's like, okay, I'll be the bride, but I'm not your bride. I'm no one's bride, but I'll be the bride. So that's why she kind of said,
yeah, I kind of get the idea of that. And it reminds me of this whole thing about wedding vows used to say man and wife, right? That's what wedding vows used to say. And now I think they say, what is it, husband and wife or man and woman? But it's symmetry, right? And I totally get that. I get the logic of that. What I don't get is if it was something about if Frank now was the husband, then I would get it, right? There, because now we've established like an equality, like a parity. But we don't. We don't even talk about him. She just says, "I am now the bride," and that makes me empowered and strong. That's the part I don't get.
Didn't she mention that she was proposed to a couple of times before Frankenstein?
I'm not sure about that.
Would it have sung better if like that whole protest that she had going on and like all the random women started putting the makeup on him, wearing like the bride thing actually was something in the movie as opposed to like a 5 minute thing, and was like maybe fully fleshed out, and like she'd like really taken on this persona, almost like in like Joker 1, where you kind of see Arthur Fleck fully become the Joker, and everyone in the town start to like see him as that, and like start to like take on like this persona and start to like dress like the clown and stuff like that. If they'd done something like that in a sense for her, then I think the whole like the bride tag would then make a little bit more sense. But I think I'm a little bit more on Daniel's side in this, where she kind of said it and I was a bit like, why? I was quite confused as to why that was like the choice that she'd made.
It might also be just a case of just taking the word back, which has never made sense to me in other contexts. If it was something like where there was now an army of brides, and for whatever reason they are using that term to call themselves that, and if it, by her being the bride, she's one of them, and she's nothing special, she's just one of the many who are rebelling and pushing back. If it had been that, if she kind of disappears into the crowd of brides, and so the police can't find her, which is, I think, a scene from Joker, right? I think that's what you were getting at. You see what I mean? Like, it's all muddled, it's all unclear. And on some level, it's the job of the movie to tell us this, not explicitly. It doesn't have to be said in plain language to the screen. In fact, it shouldn't, but it should be communicated in some way. And there's just way too many instances of stuff like this where they just say stuff and it's supposed to be obvious, but it's not, and it doesn't make sense. At least not to me. If it was just one thing, it would be okay. Like no movie is perfect, but it's like the entire approach to storytelling where they do this stuff. Like that's just how they communicate these ideas. It feels a lot like the script was written in the way when Ida channels Mary Shelley and she just blurts stuff out and it makes sense to her but nobody else. Like that's kind of how that comes across to me, because like it's fine to have the idea, but then you have to actually put it into a shape that is persuasive and makes sense to other people, and this just didn't. I kind of just shrugged at the end when the movie was over and left, and it's not convinced me of anything. If anything, it's made me kind of resistant to the movie's message because it annoyed me so much. It did not make me want to listen because it's told in a way that is just annoying and frustrating, and that can't be success.
But with the ending, because there was a lot going on with the ending, obviously it felt like the unnecessary amount of gunfire, which that told me in a way that was like society's reaction to the fight against patriarchy, to women empowerment. That was number one. Number two, love never dies. That was another point which I got from that. When their hands were moving towards each other, that was just the two main points as to what I think the ending was trying to give off. But I do understand why by the ending, Daniel, you're like, do you know what I'm saying? Because I don't know, it was just a bit too, just the execution of these points were just a bit too messy, you know what I'm saying? Especially the scenes where it came to like the global rebellion where, you know, the woman, I think there was they did kind of like take revenge on the boss mob, right? The mob boss. What's his name? Lupino or something like that?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, Lupino. So even that scene that wasn't really too significant for me because of everything that happened beforehand. Like I said, I did like the film, but not by much. And the reason not by much is because the way that these themes were executed. Because I think what they did do, Daniel, though, I think at the end of each message, I think the message was delivered at the end of each theme. However, it just was done very dodgy and very messy. That's why for me, it didn't have so much of an impact how it ended.
I'll be honest, by the time we get to the ending and the big showdown in the lab, I'm off the train. I'm not paying it. Like, I am paying attention, but I'm not interested in engaging with it anymore because I've been annoyed for so long at this point and I just want to get out of the theater. And then I think the ending is quite messy, like you said, and it's quite opaque, right? It just does not make its point very clearly. So this whole thing about the detective and the doctor kind of reviving Frank and the bride against the police orders, but they kind of just realize what the right thing to do is, and so they do it. And then like you said, it ends with the corpses holding hands. So like love never dies and all of that. It's like, okay, so what? It's kind of my reaction. Like what's the point of all of this at the end? And was it worth the journey? And is it a worthwhile? Like, is this the way you should sell this message?
Because it still has to remind you that it's a love story, though. Because it's not all just about women empowerment. You know what I'm saying? Because if it was a thing where they just died without holding hands, then you could have said, okay, this ended off like as a woman empowerment type of film. But with the hand holding, it was like, okay, it's a woman empowerment film as well as a love story as well. Because sometimes you could kind of forget that, you know, it is a romance film in a way as well.
I don't like. Yes, it is. I'm just trying to make sense of the ending and what the ultimate point is. And my bottom line is just, it did not make its point very effectively because I have no idea what characters are thinking at this point. I have no idea what anything means. I don't know what's real. That's kind of my problem with it. And if it was a little bit clearer about what the ultimate point was, and we weren't constantly jumping back and forth between points and themes and ideas, and then the ending had told me, okay, this is what it all comes down to, and this is how it ends. And this is what it all means in the end. I might be more charitable towards it. But at this point, the movie has convinced me that this is the incoherent ramblings of a pretentious artist, as opposed to somebody who wants to tell a story and make a point through that story. That's kind of the price you have to you pay for being this artsy and this non-literal, right? Like this is kind of why I like more literal storytelling better, because it keeps a foot on the ground and it keeps character actions relatable. That makes it easier to care for them and about them and get into their heads. And here I'm bouncing off them completely, like all of them. At least in the last half hour, 45 minutes. In the beginning, it's a different story. Like I'm in Frank's head and I can kind of get how he views the world. By the end of it, I cannot say the same thing about any of the characters. It's the problem. And that is why I can't give like a coherent answer about what the ending all means, is because I'm not convinced it means anything.
I'm sure there is some type of meaning in that. I just don't think it's put in a way that's easily digestible. In a sense, and when I say that, I mean when the author was writing it, I'm sure they had like this like kind of like grandiose idea, and I think maybe this is an example of when you don't tell someone to stop putting new stuff or putting sort of ideas into it, because like when you try to conclude all of it, it just doesn't relate, which is a shame, because I think this just had so much more potential to be a lot better than what it was. But I think ultimately it's just a case of too many ideas, too much style, not enough substance for us to like latch onto anything at all.
Yeah. Shall we move on to last words?
Okay. My opinion still stands. Dodgy film, liked it, but not by much. However, I've understood way more than I did prior to this review. I wouldn't recommend you guys to watch this. I'd probably say wait for this on streaming, because I think there's just a lot going on. However, I appreciate the message, and I appreciate that it's a bit extravagant in terms of like how they execute this. Even though it didn't feel like you're watching like an extravagant big budget type of film, because I was looking at the budget earlier. Me and Daniel, I was like, this should not cost 80 to 85 million. Just no way. I still appreciate that they were trying to go wacky with it. And I appreciate the transition from, the whole Gothic scene to high chase, kind of like crime scene, Bonnie and Clyde, like have you mentioned before, Bonnie and Clyde type of vibe. So there are things that I appreciate, and I appreciate the moments, and I appreciated, just what I was watching in terms of the story. I just didn't like the way that it was executed that much. So I'm going to give this one I think I'm going to give it just touching. It's literally just touching 6 out of 10, because I don't think 5.5 out of 10 is fair on the film. So I'll give it's just touching a 6 out of 10.
For me, because we kind of have to do these reviews every single week. And
you literally asked for this. I tried to talk you out of it.
No. No, I mean, I had the much better. I think I had the best time with this movie than everyone here, to be honest. But what I was going to say, in a world where we do these reviews on a weekly basis, and sometimes when there isn't like a traditional movie, we kind of have to watch something that's a little bit off the cuff or like a little bit more unique in its approach to to filmmaking. I like this a lot than compared to what I've had to watch previously. Again, like I mentioned The Surfer, which was terrible, and then there was even like that Dracula movie that I had to watch, which was like some like gothic horror stuff, and it was just wasn't my style, and it just wasn't my thing. And with this, despite all the negatives it has with its story, its characters, its ideas, and how muddled it is, and its themes, and everything to do with kind of like the writing aspect of it, there's so many issues with it. But just on the in terms of like entertainment value and the style of it, I can appreciate this one a little bit more, and I think that's just more personal preference over anything. So would I say for you to go and watch the movie? Probably not. Like, you're probably not gonna have a good time. Most people aren't liking the movie, and I've been a little bit harsh on it, so I wouldn't recommend you to go watch it. But I'm just kind of saying, for me, as a personal preference, and again, we even saw it in this discussion, The Bride's Ramblings, I thought it was entertaining whilst being nonsense, while it kind of grated on everyone else here. So yeah, I guess with that, it'll probably get a 6.5 out of 10. I think it's held back a lot by the writing as opposed to anything else for me.
I think you can distinguish between a movie that's not for you and a movie that's poorly made. And I maintain that The Surfer is a movie that is not for many people, but I think you can look at the movie and say, okay, what it does, like it sets out to do a thing and it does that thing, and you can like it or not like it, but it's there. And here, like I was totally ready to say, okay, The Bride is definitely not for me, but I can recognize that it's well made, or I can recognize the intention, or I can see what it's going for, or whatever it might be, right? And I just ended up not getting any of that. Like, I think this is a convoluted, pretentious mess that thinks much more highly of itself than is justified. I think it makes very little points. It touches on a few ideas, but does basically nothing with them. It's too overstuffed. It's too overcrowded. I just do not see anything positive about this, right? Like, there's just much better movies. Like, if you're interested in this kind of story, they're just much better movies out there you could watch that are actually well-told stories. And this is just not one of them. So that's like a 5 out of 16 for me.
Damn. Oh. All right, guys. I think that was a great way to end the show.
If you reached this part of the episode, as always, we appreciate your support. We appreciate you pressing play and giving us a listen. And as always, if you liked what you heard today and you enjoyed our discussion, you should probably tell a friend. And if you thought we were chatting a whole bunch of nonsense, you should probably tell an enemy. We are the Eye of the Storm podcast.
All right, guys. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we will catch you next time. Au revoir.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.